Hi guys, and welcome back, and welcome to my brand new sketchbook. I've been trying to get back into the habit of sketching traditionally. I had a moment a while ago that I've already talked about, but that's where I discovered that I really missed and love sketching in an actual sketchbook, a more traditional form of it rather than doing my sketches digitally. So I had some really cheap sketchbooks lying around that I had gotten on clearance. I worked through them. I did a little walkthrough over on my Patreon if you want to see what I had done in one of those. But I had given myself this promise where if I got back into the habit of sketching and I was able to fill a certain amount of the sketchbook, it didn't have to be full, but I had to feel like I had made a habit and had gotten into that, then I would let myself pick out a nice sketchbook, one that I would love to pull out. I love the feel of it, and I finally did that. So I picked this sketchbook out. I do love it, and I right before I bought this, I actually had this epiphany, like another step in my sketch journey where I'm discovering what I actually love doing and getting back into that joy that comes from it. And that is that I actually really love sketching from references. I think that this is definitely something that I had to work long and hard to get to the point where that was actually something that I could say. so so growing up, I never drew from references. It wasn't even until college that it was started to get drilled into my head. I only looked at references when it was like, I want a hand to be in this very specific position, and then I would spend ages looking for a very specific hand, and then it was just this very unpleasant experience. and yeah, I finally got that hammered into my head where I want to make better art, so I need to use references. But that never really filtered over into my sketching, because for a long time I didn't really sketch for fun. I sketched for when it was time to do a new piece. So when I was sitting down and I was like, I'm going to sketch, I feel like sketching, it would always just be from my head. And then I was always so frustrated with it because it just wasn't working. It didn't look good. And there are a lot of people out there that have looked at enough references and practiced enough that they can do that. They can sit there and draw right from their head, and it looks right and it looks good and it's satisfying. But I haven't done enough of that, so that when I did sketch, I started just building up these really frustrated negative emotions that were attached with sketching, when really it wasn't the sketching that was the negative aspect. It was the fact that I was trying to make something work from nothing and then not being happy with that result. So a little while ago, I had this realization. I was sitting at a convention, or a conference, I guess is more the right word for it, in these classes learning about art and storytelling. And I had thought about it. I'm like, I want to be able to draw while I'm there. I want to be able to draw and listen. And I know that I get like this stage fright when I'm drawing from my head and I'm in a more public place. It's even harder to come up with ideas. So I was just going to sit down. I was going to bring up references on my phone, and I was going to practice drawing heads. It sounds so simple saying it, but it was this like epiphany where, as I was sketching from these references, the sketching process just felt so good because I felt like I was learning something and my artwork was turning into something that looked good. And when I'm working on a full piece, I always look at references, always. I never just sit down, unless it's like the initial thumbnailing or the very initial get that idea down. I never sit down to draw something without having a good reference to look off of it to make sure that the face is right and the anatomy is right. So of course it makes sense that if I'm going to sketch, I should also be utilizing those tools, at least for a while, before I can really build up those muscles. And I definitely know that I want the outcome to eventually be where I feel strong enough with my understanding of the forms of the face and with anatomy that I can just sit down and make things come from my mind and then draw them. But I feel like I'm finally able to see where I actually currently am right now with my skill level, and see the things that I can do to make it better. I also always struggle with coming up with like a concept or an idea for when it's time to sketch something that I actually want to draw and that I feel like is telling more of a story. And there's just so many things that I want to put in it, but I feel like when I sit down to just draw, I'm grasping at straws. I can't quite make anything quite come together. So when I'm working off of just learning the human form and drawing from reference, it takes all of that stress away from the sketching process for me. So I can sit down and I can draw something and it feels productive, as opposed to when I sit down and I have no ideas and I'm drawing something that doesn't really look good anyways, and then it just feels like I'm just wasting my time. I just feel like I've finally unlocked a way to really enjoy something that I know is good for me as an artist. It's kind of like growing up and realizing that you actually do like those vegetables that you hated as a kid. I feel like it's like, oh, now I know how to get better at drawing faces, better at drawing the anatomy, and actually like it and actually make it part of my process. So yeah, that's my goal with this sketchbook, is I just want to fill it up with faces and eventually figures. Maybe I'll just focus this sketchbook on faces, but yeah, I wanted to get a sketchbook that would look nice and it was hardcover so that I can fill it up and then put it on a shelf, and then I can get a new sketchbook and then fill that up, and then 10 or 20 sketchbooks down the line I can look back at those first ones that I had done and see how much improvement has gone by. So I do want these to feel a little bit more like a time capsule of my improvement, and that's something that I don't really have in such a concise way in any other form. I can look at the finished pieces that I've done and see the improvement, but as far as like the actual progress of the things that I'm learning concretely like this, I can't really look at something like a sketchbook and see the improvement. So I'm kind of excited about that. I think that it's going to be great motivation to be able to have this tangible form of progression. But a little bit about, as I'm drawing, I am trying to be very delicate, I guess, maybe that's not the right word, about my approach and my observations of the people in these references that I'm studying. So I'm really trying to make sure that I'm kicking out any initial need to draw something the way that I think that it looks rather than the way that it is. And I like to take at least a couple seconds before I start putting any lines down, where I just look at the reference and try to get to know the face a little bit more of that person. I want to see what are some of the more unique features, what are things that I really want to accentuate and make sure that it shows up in this drawing because it is unique to that person. I also am trying to really pay attention to plumb lines, and that's just one of several words for how different features can line up if you draw a line. So like if the head is turned in just a certain way, the corner of the eye might line up with the corner of, or the middle of the mouth, and then the edge of the chin, if that kind of makes sense. So looking at the reference and seeing where these benchmarks are, and then looking at a bunch of those from all different directions, it helps you to start getting everything more accurate. And I realize I don't do that as much as I should. So once I started implementing that and really focusing on that for some of these drawings, they turned out much better. And I can tell on the ones that I was not really focusing on that, they're not quite as accurate. They don't look as good and as sharp and as right. So I definitely like to make that much more of a careful study thing. It really is just giving it the time and the attention to study those things as I'm drawing it, and not be afraid to really start lightly and place things down and then look at all the plumb lines and then readjust and then slowly approach the final drawing the way that it's actually going to be. And I've always known this, but it was extra enjoyable in this session of drawing, is that I love drawing profiles of people. I think that it's probably the easiest for me, but it's also so much fun because there's so much negative space and I feel like it's really dynamic. So I was letting myself have a couple of those in this session. I didn't want it to overtake all of them. I didn't want to do too many of them so that I wasn't learning from the things that I do struggle with, but it was really fun to be able to get to know the different profiles of several different people, and then being able to study that and see how that does affect the negative space around it. That's another thing too that I'm trying to focus on. I don't remember who I heard like this little nugget of thought from, and that's looking at the spaces around the things that you're painting, so, or drawing. And I think he was talking about painting, but But anyways, it's so if I'm drawing an eye, I can focus on, well, what is the actual shape of the crease around it or the shadow that's being cast, and then that all lends more information to the actual shape of the eye. That helps me to understand it better when it comes time to drawing. So I'm trying to do that a little bit more, looking beyond just that little feature that I'm looking at or that edge, and then seeing, okay, well, this edge is shaped this way because this shape is this way, and then that shape is connecting to this shape. And yeah, just seeing the connection between one feature to the next, I've found has been really helpful. But I think that the one key thing that I needed to figure out and let myself loose from, that has allowed me to actually enjoy sketching and enjoy drawing from references, is that I needed to stop being afraid of failure. There are so many things that I've drawn that don't look good. And when it comes to drawing references and drawing it in my sketchbook, it gets really daunting. It can feel like, oh, I'm going to put this down and it's going to look really bad and someone's going to see it and they're going to judge me. And it's this terribly toxic way of thinking about art and our progress and learning. When I realized that that was my biggest hesitation from sitting down and just drawing a more complex angle of the face or a really technical figure, I felt so much better when I let that go, and I was like, that's just not something that needs to matter. If it doesn't look good, no one has to see it, but I get to know that I learned from it. And I saw my weaknesses, and seeing your weaknesses and seeing how you can improve them is so valuable, and it is not worth being afraid of if it means that you're not going to do it, period. And I say you, but I really mean me. That is what I needed to learn, that I don't need to be afraid of drawing something that doesn't end up working. It's going to be good for me. There was one head in here that I drew and I did not like how it turned out. I didn't at all. But I'm glad that I did it. I actually ended up erasing it and drawing another one on top. But that mileage that I got from drawing it, it was still there. I still figured things out. I still saw things that I struggled with, and now I know what I can focus on when I'm drawing in the future. And that is it for today. I do want to give a massive thank you to all of my patrons over on Patreon. You guys are incredible, and I deeply appreciate every single one of you. And yeah, that is about it. Oh, I forgot to say, if you are interested, the sketchbook that I did use today is from Hahnemühle. It's the Nostalgie, I think, sketchbook. Yes, Nostalgie sketchbook. I bought it with my own money. It was really expensive, but I love it. It was just a little treat for myself. But anyways, that is it for today. So I'll be back next week with another art video. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you then.